Hello everyone, and welcome back to Full Moon News. Don't worry, I won't be doing this one live. I learned my lesson from last time. Though, hopefully it wasn't that bad. Now then, this past lunar cycle, or month, well, it feels like my cup runneth over, really. However, I will still keep it to probably 2 stories this time, because one of them is quite long. Actually, they're both pretty long, so yeah, probably 2 stories this time. So anyway, without further ado, here we go. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have seen a million videos on this by now, and a good bit of news about it, but I admit I just couldn't keep my hands off it. And that, of course, would be the video Buy Extra Credits. Now, I let them slide for the whole games shouldn't cost $60 anymore video that they did, which ended up being basically a, hey, microtransactions are needed, otherwise games will be $90 or $100. Like, that was the gist of it, really. But this one, this is just too good. So, I'm going to start this part of the video off by structuring this a bit like a typical response video. I'm trimming some stuff out for time's sake, but we'll leave a link to the original video in this video's description. So here I go.
There you are, playing the PvP in your World War II shooter, and all of a sudden, you're a Nazi. You didn't ask for this. You didn't choose this. Yet there it is. And it's treated no differently than playing a British soldier.
Okay, so you say, you didn't ask for this and you didn't choose this. The problem with that is that with all games nowadays, there's info. If you get the game physically, you have the back of the game box that gives you a general idea about the game, its features, things like that. If you get it via a digital storefront, then you have the Steam description or, the description on Origin. Wherever you get your game from, there's going to be a description next to it. Even if it's small, there's still something. You also have the internet at your fingertips. If you have the ability to play these games' multiplayer campaigns, you have the ability to look up facts about it as well. So yeah, if you want info about a game, you can get it quite easily. If you didn't make an informed purchase, that's more on you as the consumer than it is on the game developer. Make an informed purchase. It's really best for everyone that way.
This is bad on so many levels. No one should ever have a random chance of fighting for the Nazis, and we should never express that there's no meaningful difference between Nazis and Allied soldiers, or that they're functionally interchangeable.
Alright, I don't really think anyone's doing that. I admit that I don't play many first-person shooter games. However, as I understand it, various types of players in team-based online multiplayer games tend to have different loadouts. For example, Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, which I did play, had different species who all had various abilities and weapon loadouts. I imagine games like this can be very similar in that case. Also, I don't think anyone believes that they are functionally identical, as you say. Once again, due to the different loadouts and abilities they may have, but also due to just what one knows about these forces in real life. The single-player campaigns of these games tend to illustrate both sides and what they want. I won't say they are the epitome of storytelling, but they certainly don't say they're both the same, so screw it, either. And for the sake of argument, let us say the game was saying it was functionally identical. So, they may be functionally identical in a video game. This does not make them ideologically identical in real life. The two are separate. I know you want to link them, as will be evidenced throughout this video, but there is a difference.
Oh, and on a similar note, let's please stop forcing people to play as terrorists as well. There you are, playing your modern shooter, and all of a sudden you're a terrorist. You didn't ask for this, you didn't choose this, and yet second verse, same as the first. There it is. I mean, that's literally the name of your side in the game. We can do better than this.
Okay, so the same thing I said before still applies. However, I'd like to point out a couple pet peeves I have. Firstly, this is more about the visuals than the message, but there's something I find a bit irksome about the speaker for this video standing behind a sort of podium. It creates some sort of association in my mind that I'm being talked down to. I'm not sure if you all agree, but that's how I feel about it. It's also very sanctimonious, especially the "we can do better than this" bit. Now then, I'm sure the game tells you a bit about these sides, just like before, and once again, no one thinks that just because they are functionally identical in a game, if they even are, that terrorists and counter-terrorists are identical in real life. Ideologically speaking, of course.
No one should have to put on the costume of an ideology they find abhorrent without actually opting into it in your game. And by making people do so, we get them to stop thinking about it, to stop thinking of the meaning behind these things. We normalize them. We make them just window dressing for entertainment. Those uniforms, those symbols, become things that no longer inherently revolt us. They reduce our visceral reaction to seeing the embodiment of these ideologies.
Firstly, I did cut a bit out here for the sake of time, but again, I'll link the full video in the description so you know I'm not being disingenuous or taking things out of context. Moving along, this is really starting to sound like the idea that if we have violence in video games, then it'll translate to violence in real life. Let me just play around with the wording a bit here. Ahem. If we have violence in video games, we will eventually stop thinking about the violence that happens every day in the real world. People being slapped, people being punched, those things no longer revolt us. Our reaction to seeing violence becomes lukewarm at most. You see how what they're saying kind of sounds like that? Granted, I toyed with the exact wording a bit, but I'm hoping I've made my point. Oh, and I doubt it needs to be said, but I will say it anyway. I fully disagree with this argument. Again, Extra Credits is saying that we cannot disassociate games from real life. And one last bit. I don't think the symbols in and of themselves should give us a visceral reaction, as it were. I think it's the ideology behind the symbols that we need to worry about. While I don't play many FPS games, I am not inherently freaked out by various symbols. Symbols in and of themselves are not harmful. It is what they represent that was and is and can be harmful. I believe thinking in a bit of a deeper way like this is more beneficial to the conversation, but that's just my personal opinion on it.
Now, does this make us totally ignore the history that comes with them? No. But for some people, it moves them from the territory of revolting to just edgy. It makes scrawling a swastika on something change from unthinkable to just dangerous. It means you might not take iron crosses all over a website as a warning sign that you should immediately leave, and if you don't leave, you might start reading and buying into hateful ideas there.
Whoa now, this is exactly what I was saying just a bit ago. You really are pushing the notion that gamers are totally brain dead, aren't you? So, just because we get used to seeing a symbol, we're going to automatically buy into the ideology that symbol represents? I really don't see how those are connected at all. I see crosses on a constant basis. That hasn't made me a Christian. Not only that, your argument seems to be that if a person sees a hateful thing like this, they should automatically leave. I completely disagree. I believe knowing both sides of something is important. Hating something when you know absolutely nothing about it is a quite dangerous thing to do. Your opinion on something should be an educated one. But, once again, seeing something in a video game does not mean we will buy into it in the real world. That's a foolish and, quite frankly, dangerous assertion to make.
By the time you've played 100 hours of being a Nazi, their voice stabs become memes and in-jokes with your friends. By the 1000th time you've respawned as a terrorist, you're either celebrating them or making fun of them. Neither of which helps the global crisis we have that takes thousands of lives every year.
Once again, I'm going to point out the somewhat negative tone I'm getting from the visuals here. Look at how the quote-unquote gamers portrayed. Piles of energy drink cans, and the pile gets bigger in the next shot. So, this says to me that you think gamers are idiots hopped up on energy drinks constantly. If you insult an audience, they probably won't want to listen to you. This is why people tend not to listen to a lot of games journalists anymore. Now then, I don't see the problem with things in a game being memes or jokes with your friends. These are just things in a video game. They will not translate to real life for the millionth time. As far as fixing the global crisis, sure, I'd love to do that, I really would, but I really don't see games no longer having Nazis or terrorists making any difference in that. And for the last time, no one thinks these people are morally equivalent.
So what do? That's easy. Don't make them morally equivalent. Don't make there be no in-game moral difference between your Nazis and your allies, between your terrorists and your counter-terrorist squads. Frame PvP as a training exercise, or simply take one of your non-odious sides and recolor them so that it's red versus blue, rather than Axis versus allies.
So basically, they want us to dumb down games on the off chance someone can't disassociate games from reality? See how this once more sounds like the games cause violence argument? It also is similar to the games cause sexism argument that I've heard. Oh, tone down the gore in games, don't show blood, and make women wear more clothing and get rid of the jiggle physics. Look, people should be able to make the type of game they want to make. That's the end of the discussion as far as I'm concerned. This is about making a fun game at the end of the day, not about proposing whatever your chosen morality is. I think that's a lesson more people need to understand. Now they seem to realize that game devs might want Axis versus allies and the like anyway, so here's their ideas about that.
And if you decide that you need to have both sides be playable, don't make them interchangeable. Don't have players randomly spawn in as one or the other. Allow players to choose which side they're on. Now, of course, this has all sorts of in-game problems, such as creating shorter wait times for fascists, but you know what? Those wait times could be artificially extended if it meant players had an active choice in what teams they would represent if you're saying we need people playing Nazis in our games.
Wow, that was... Dude, did you just call anyone that chooses to play as the bad guys fascists? So by this argument, you're saying anyone who plays as a bad guy in a video game is actually a bad guy? Maybe it's not the gamers that can't disassociate gaming from reality. Maybe it's you and people like you. This was just insanity. Not only that, it still creates a balance issue. Even if some people will choose to play as the bad guys, it probably won't be as many. The reason games make it more random is so that each team has an equal number. If players have a choice, that most likely won't be the case. So yeah, this wouldn't work anyway. But I think this part of the video is one of the biggest reasons this video has so many dislikes.
And if you're going to say, but we need it for historical reasons, then your game better actually be historical. You can't really just hide behind the fact you called your desert map El Alamein and say, but it's historical. If that were the case, you need your PvP to at least represent real historical events and be a realistic take on those battles. Once you make both sides balanced, it's also no longer historical. And you can't really say that you need Nazis anymore for historical accuracy. Oh, and once you let players get cool weapons that weren't actually at that particular battleground, it's also no longer historically accurate.
I understand the point here, but I believe this is very black and white thinking. You can have a game that has a basis in history without being 100% historically accurate. It's a pretty hard and fast rule that art imitates life. So art, such as video games, imitating some bits of history makes perfect sense to me. On the other hand, if the game was 100% historically accurate, it probably wouldn't be very fun as a video game. And, as I mentioned before, a game is meant to be fun. I'm all for games trying to convey deep, meaningful story, or games that want to perhaps tell true stories through the lens of a game. But if there's not some element of fun or enjoyment, then people aren't going to really like it very much. So yeah, I think that thinking it's 100% historically accurate or don't bother is very black and white. I personally prefer the gray of using history as a baseline or a springboard and then doing your own thing.
And look, we're not saying we can't have games about World War II or about terrorism. We're not even saying we shouldn't make games where you play as a Nazi or a terrorist. But what we are saying is that the fact that you're playing as a Nazi or a terrorist in a game has to mean something.
I completely disagree here. It doesn't have to mean anything. This is a video game. A developer is well within their rights to make the game fun just for the sake of it. If you want to tell a compelling narrative and you want both sides to really be explored, that's great. However, it's not necessary. There is absolutely nothing wrong with only being fun. In every other medium, there are things that are just for fun. There's no reason video games should be an exception to this rule. Now, I have no problem at all with you being very analytical about games, and I have no problem with you desiring games with compelling and thought-provoking messages. However, not every game has to do that, just like not every movie, book, or TV show has to do it. And the rest of the video is just a reiteration of the "we can and should do better" rhetoric from before. Again, there's a link at the bottom if you want to see the bits that I cut out, though I did include most of the video here. I don't believe I'm being disingenuous or taking anything out of context, though. I just trimmed a bit of the fat and included what I wanted to respond to. Now, as I alluded to before, this video was not received well, even by their own audience. You would think that would be the end of the story, right? Well, no. I guess moral grandstanding and letting people have their opinions and calling it a day just wasn't something the people at Extra Credits wanted to do. So their community manager decided to jump in with this wonderful tweet, which I will read for you in case you're just listening to this. I don't think enough people seem to understand that, 1, we fully expect this to happen every time we've uploaded a "Games Are Political" video, and that 2, we love losing all the bigoted subscribers. Are you kidding me? Less bigotry is great. Dislikes are still engagement. Well, that was, something. So, let's see. A "Games Are Political" video losing subs, as you say. I can kind of see that. However, in my optimism, I'd like to think you could present the idea in a way that doesn't divide people. I truly think it's how you approach the topic. However, you approach it in a very sanctimonious and preachy way, which turns most people off. Secondly, you call all people who dislike or unsub bigots? Wow. Talk about painting with a broad brush. I personally disagree with your take, and I do not consider myself bigoted at all, and, in fact, have listed some good reasons as to why I disagree with you. As a thought, maybe you shouldn't just say, "everyone who disagrees with me is a bigot," like a child, but accept some of the constructive criticism that is being thrown your way. One I saw was that your use of the Iron Cross was inaccurate. Apparently, the Iron Cross was used in Germany before the Nazi regime took over. There's also a basic sentiment among many that simply coloring teams red and blue would be kind of boring and make games very samey. This seems a very apolitical view to me, and once again would have nothing to do with their ideological stances. Lastly, I just don't see how creating an echo chamber and yelling at all the subscribers or viewers that disagree with you is any way to build a good, lasting, or substantial community. I know I'm still pretty new to this whole YouTube thing, but that seems like common sense to me. Well, I guess I'll leave that story there. Even now, they seem to have no regret for this mess. I guess that's fair enough. I honestly don't care much, but I do think this stuff is pretty insane, and these ideas are pretty terrible, which is why I addressed it in so much detail. I also admit that I'm curious as to whether or not you guys want me to do more things where I respond to videos and articles instead of just this once-a-month segment. Let me know in the comments. And also, speaking of experiments, I've decided to split this video into 2 parts. I'd like to test to see if I should do one big full moon news video or split them up into a few videos having one story per video. Again, let me know what you guys prefer. Also, feel free to leave any other feedback in the comments and rate the video. You know, all the standard YouTube fare. Lastly, if you're feeling generous and want to be my bestest friend forever, donation links will be in the description. See you in the next part.